everyone, and welcome back. Ready to kind of go deep on something that's always been a big deal, but maybe even more so now.
I think so.
We're talking about oligarchy,
Right.
and we've got some interesting stuff from Wikipedia and Encyclopedia Britannica to help us out here. So, what exactly is oligarchy? How has it shown up through history and even now? And could it be closer to home than we think? Those are the big questions for this deep dive.
You know, what really gets me about oligarchy is it's not just some old term from textbook. It's like this question that's been bugging societies forever.
Hmm.
Does power really stay with the people, or does it always end up with just a few?
So let's break that down. Both Wikipedia and Britannica, they both start with this basic definition. Oligarchy, it means rule by a small number of people,
Okay.
but it's not any small group,
No,
right?
no, no. These aren't just any random folks. They're kind of like connected by something, wealth or family connections,
Ah,
religious authority,
uh-huh.
maybe even military power. It's like they've got the VIP pass to the power club.
And to hold on to that power, these oligarchies, they don't always play fair. Our sources even point out that sometimes they use some pretty harsh tactics to stay in control.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. If your power depends on keeping everyone else in check,
Right.
well, history shows that can lead to some bad stuff.
Hmm.
Oppression, silencing people who disagree, and definitely not doing what's best for everyone. It's no wonder Aristotle saw this as like a messed up version of aristocracy.
Okay, wait. For those of us who maybe weren't paying attention in philosophy class, remind me again, aristocracy? What's that all about?
Oh, right. Good point.
Mhm.
Aristocracy is also ruled by a few, but ideally the best few.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
those of virtue and wisdom governing for everyone's benefit. Aristotle saw oligarchy as what happens when that ideal gets corrupted,
Right.
where the rulers are just in it for themselves, not the common good. Kind of makes you think about how power can change people, huh?
It really does. And it makes you wonder, where do we see this play out in the real world? Because our sources,
Oh.
they don't just leave it as this theoretical thing. They give some pretty stark examples of oligarchies actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And these examples, they go across different cultures and times.
Mhm.
Like we've got South Africa under apartheid, that system where a small white minority had all the power.
Wow.
Or Liberia, where the descendants of freed American slaves, the Americo-Liberians, they formed this whole ruling elite. You can see how the history of colonialism really shaped those oligarchies.
So in those cases, you can kind of draw a line from history to how the oligarchy formed, but this isn't just ancient history, right?
Right.
Our sources mention some modern examples too.
Oh, for sure. Take the Philippines under Ferdinand Marcos. Family ties and a network of business monopolies, they totally propped up his rule. That's classic how control over a country's money can turn into political power for just a few.
And then there's post-Soviet Russia, that rapid sell-off of state-owned assets that created this whole new class of super rich oligarchs with tons of political influence. It's like capitalism on steroids, creating this new breed of power players.
You know, it's fascinating, isn't it? No matter the time or place, the drive for a few to grab power and hold on to it, it's like a constant in history. Which brings up this really important question. Are even systems designed to be democratic truly immune to this?
That's where the iron law of oligarchy comes in, right? That idea that even in democracies, we could be slipping towards oligarchy without even knowing it. And our Wikipedia source explains this really well.
Right. It's based on Robert Michaels, who said that large organizations, even those with good intentions, like democracies,
Mm.
they naturally tend towards concentrating power.
Mm.
Think about it. To run a big complex system, you need specialized leaders,
Yeah.
people with expertise.
So basically, we need the people who can get things done.
Exactly. But over time, that need for efficiency for smart leadership, it can lead to a small group having too much control. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, even in systems that are supposed to be governed by the many.
So we're saying that even just the act of organizing, which any society needs to do, could be the breeding ground for oligarchy. That's kind of a crazy thought. And what's really interesting is our sources point out that this isn't just about governments.
Right, right. Think about the business world, for example. We see this in how some business groups act.
Wikipedia actually gives us like a checklist for spotting possible oligarchies in business.
Yeah.
First, are these groups the biggest private owners in the country?
Second, do they have serious political muscle enough to push their own agenda?
And third, are they controlling lots of businesses and coordinating across different sectors to make their influence even bigger?
If you can say yes to those questions, then it's worth looking closer to see if you're dealing with a potential oligarchy,
Yeah.
even if it's not called that.
It's like they're working behind the scenes, but their impact is everywhere. It really makes you think about who's really in charge, doesn't it?
It totally does. And what's even more interesting is that our sources say this power concentration isn't limited to just wealth or politics.
Yeah, Wikipedia mentions this really intriguing idea of an intellectual oligarchy, something George Bernard Shaw explores in his play Major Barbara.
Shaw, always the one to shake things up,
Yeah.
suggests that even the smartest people, the intellectual elite, could end up making their own kind of oligarchy.
So we're talking about a situation where a society relies so much on a small group of thinkers that those thinkers basically become the rulers,
Exactly.
even without holding any official position.
It's like rule by brains, but Shaw seems to be warning us that any concentration of power, even intellectual power, could become a problem. Makes you wonder, could a society ever really rely on just a few people to make decisions for everyone without things going wrong?
Yeah. It's definitely a thought-provoking idea. So we've talked about what oligarchy is. We've looked at some examples across history and different parts of society. But now I think it's time to get to the heart of it all.
You mean the big question,
Yeah.
does the United States, with its ideas about democracy, actually show signs of oligarchy? Our sources dive right into that debate, and it's one with some serious implications for all of us.
And things get interesting here because our sources cite several economists and political scientists who say the U.S. does show some pretty strong oligarchic tendencies.
They point to this massive concentration of wealth and influence among just a tiny elite,
Mm-hmm.
which they say gives this group way more power over political decisions than the average person.
And this isn't just some fringe theory either. Wikipedia even mentions this 2014 study by Martin Gillens and Benjamin Page that actually looked at policy outcomes in the U.S. over 2 decades.
What's amazing is their findings suggest that wealthy individuals and business groups, they usually get what they want in terms of policy, even if it's against what most citizens want.
Wow. That's a pretty sobering thought. It suggests that while the U.S. might have all the signs of a democracy, elections, free speech, and all that, the
Right.
actual process of making policies could be really skewed in favor of the wealthy and powerful.
Now, before we jump to conclusions, it's important to note that our sources also say there are a lot of critics who push back against calling the U.S. an oligarchy.
Right. They say that we shouldn't dismiss the influence of regular people so easily.
Right.
And things might not be as bad as some people say. It's a good reminder that the reality is probably more complicated than any one label can capture.
Exactly. And to make things even more complicated,
Right.
even within U.S. politics,
Yeah.
there have been worries about the potential for oligarchy.
Yeah. Wikipedia even mentions that in his farewell address, former President Joe Biden warned about the rise of oligarchy in the U.S., specifically pointing to what he called a tech-industrial complex as a force that concentrates power. So we've got research suggesting oligarchic tendencies, pushback from those who see a more balanced picture, and even warnings from a former president.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex issue.
Yeah.
And the debate about whether the U.S. is leaning towards oligarchy, it's not going away anytime soon.
This is why understanding what oligarchy is, seeing how it's played out in the past, and really grappling with those arguments for and against it being relevant to the U.S. is so important.
It helps us have these discussions in a more informed way.
We've covered a lot of ground already,
We have.
but there's still so much more to explore. When we come back, we'll continue this deep dive into the complexities of oligarchy and what it means for our understanding of power, governance, and really the very fabric of society. Welcome back. As we kind of get deeper into this oligarchy thing, one thing that's striking me is how it's not always this obvious power grab. It's not always a bunch of guys in suits, smoking cigars in a back room deciding everyone's fate.
Right.
It can be a lot more subtle, almost invisible.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it even more important to understand how these oligarchies can operate in ways we might not expect.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about what our Wikipedia source called putative oligarchies,
Hmm.
which sounds kind of like a secret society or something. What exactly does that mean?
So think of it this way. Imagine a system that looks normal on the surface, maybe even democratic. But underneath, it's got a lot of the same traits as an oligarchy.
Hmm.
Power is still with a select few,
Okay.
but they're not exactly showing it off.
So they're kind of camouflaged, like blending in while still running things?
Exactly. And that makes these putative oligarchies really hard to spot,
Right.
let alone challenge. They can fly under the radar, avoid all the scrutiny that more obvious oligarchies might face.
It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. You might not even know the danger until it's too late. So how do we even start to unpack these more hidden forms of power? It feels like we need to be detectives or something.
Well, the first step is recognizing the different ways oligarchies use their influence. Our sources highlight a few tactics that we see over and over.
One that comes to mind is controlling key institutions, right?
Oh, wait.
Like imagine a small group getting their hands on the media or the courts or even the education system. They could shape what people think. Control the laws, even influence how kids learn from a young age. It's like they're setting up the rules of the game to make sure they win.
Right. And don't forget the power of information, or I guess misinformation. Oligarchies can be really good at manipulating the story. Think about those fancy media campaigns.
Yeah.
All those carefully crafted messages, all designed to control how the public sees things.
It's like a magician's trick. They distract you with one hand while they're doing something else with the other.
Exactly.
And while we're talking about these subtle ways of control, we can't forget about money in politics, can
Look,
we?
you're hitting a crucial point there.
Yeah.
Oligarchies often use their wealth to influence decisions through lobbying and campaign donations.
Yeah.
It's a classic example of how money can buy political power
Right.
and tilt things in their favor.
It's like that saying, money talks.
Yeah,
But in this case, it's not just talking, it's practically writing the laws itself. And this is one of the biggest issues in that debate about whether the U.S. is an oligarchy, right?
absolutely. Critics argue that the influence of big donors and special interest groups has really distorted our democracy,
Right.
giving way too much power to those who can afford to play the game. It raises some serious questions about whether everyone's voice is really being heard.
So we've got control over institutions, manipulation of information, and the power of money in politics. Are there any other tools in the oligarchy toolkit that we should watch out for?
One that often gets overlooked is what we might call social control. Oligarchies do well when things stay the same, when they benefit from the status quo. So they're often very interested in preventing anyone from rocking the boat, silencing different viewpoints, even making people feel like it's pointless to try and change things.
It's like feeling stuck, you
Yeah.
know? You can see the problems, but you just don't feel like you can do anything about it. Does that sound familiar?
It's a very common feeling,
Mhm.
and it's often made worse by a culture of fear. Oligarchies might use surveillance censorship, even violence, to silence their critics and hold on to power.
That's scary. It reminds us that this isn't just some theoretical discussion. The fight against oligarchy is often a fight for basic human rights and freedoms.
It is, and this is where things get really complicated because up until now, we've been talking about oligarchy as this bad system,
Right.
all about concentrated power that could be oppressive and unfair. But remember earlier we talked about that intellectual oligarchy idea from George Bernard Shaw.
Yeah, where a small group of smart people might be the ones calling the shots.
Exactly. Could there be a type of oligarchy that's actually good for society?
Imagine a group of truly wise and compassionate people making decisions based on reason and really wanting to make the world better. Could that be a form of oligarchy we could actually live with?
It's an interesting thought experiment for sure. But even if we say these wise rulers have good intentions, there are still some serious problems.
Like what?
Well, who gets to decide who these wise rulers are? And once they have the power, how do we hold them accountable? If power is with just a few people, even if they seem good, it's always risky.
It's that classic problem of power corrupting, right? Even with the best intentions, who's to say they won't eventually start doing things for themselves?
Exactly. And there's another problem. Even the smartest people have biases. If only a small group is making decisions, they might miss important perspectives and make choices that don't work for everyone.
So even if we consider this benevolent oligarchy idea, it seems like there are some built-in problems that would make it hard to keep going.
That's why this whole debate about oligarchy is so important. It makes us think critically about power, how we govern ourselves, and what kind of society we want. Do we want to spread power out as much as possible, even if things get a little messy? Or are we okay with concentrating power in the hands of a few, even if it means risking oppression and inequality?
It feels like we're being asked to choose between two bad options,
Yeah.
and the stakes are really high.
You're absolutely right. And that's exactly why we need to have these conversations carefully and thoughtfully. The choices we make about how our society works have a huge impact on our lives and the lives of future generations.
And those choices are even more important now, given how fast the world is changing. We're living in a time of huge technological changes, globalization, and growing economic gaps.
You got it. And all these trends are creating new opportunities for oligarchic power to pop up and take root. Think about those giant tech companies,
Right.
the concentration of wealth with a tiny global elite and the weakening of democratic institutions in many parts of the world. It feels like we're at a point where the very idea of power is being redefined.
It's exciting and scary all at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it brings us back to the heart of this whole deep dive. How do we see the signs of oligarchy, understand its different forms, and most importantly, figure out how to stop it from taking over our lives and our freedoms?
Those are the big questions, and we're going to keep exploring them as we go into the final part of this deep dive.
All right, welcome back, everyone. As we get into this final part of our look at oligarchy, I gotta say, I'm feeling a little bit like I just watched one of those intense political movies.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
It's fascinating stuff, but also kind of unnerving, when you think about how these power dynamics could be happening all around us.
Like we peeked behind the curtain and saw how it all works.
Yeah, exactly. And these questions, they feel more urgent than ever. So we've looked at the historical examples, the sneaky ways oligarchies hold on to power.
Right.
We even thought about that benevolent oligarchy thing. But the big question for me is, what do we do about all this? How do we make sure power stays with the people, not just a select few?
That's the question, isn't it? And the tough part is there's no single answer to the problem of oligarchy. It's a complex thing that needs us to tackle it from different angles.
Okay, so let's break it down then. Our sources talk about some key strategies for dealing with these oligarchic tendencies. Where do we even start?
Well, one thing that comes up again and again is transparency.
Mm.
You know that saying sunlight is the best disinfectant?
Yeah.
It's the same here. By shedding light on how power works, exposing conflicts of interest, making decisions more open and accountable, we can make it a lot harder for oligarchies to do their thing.
It's like we're taking away their hiding places,
Exactly.
making it tougher to operate in the shadows. And this is where technology could really help, don't you think? Like investigative journalism data analysis tools.
Oh, absolutely.
Platforms for people to connect and organize these could all be tools in the fight against oligarchy.
Yeah, they could be super powerful. But remember, technology isn't good or bad on its own. It depends on who's using it and what they're using it for.
Right.
Like we talked about, oligarchies can use technology too for things like surveillance propaganda controlling information. So it's this constant back and forth to make sure technology is helping people and not just the powerful.
It's like this digital tug of war
Yeah.
between those who want to use it to give people power and those who want to use it to grab more power for themselves.
Such a good analogy. But the fight isn't just online. Another important area is the legal and regulatory stuff. Things like strengthening campaign finance laws, limiting what lobbyists can do, and making sure those antitrust regulations really have some teeth. These are all super important for making things fair and preventing too much power from ending up in too few hands.
So it's about setting clear rules for the game
Exactly.
and making sure everyone plays by those rules no matter how rich or connected they are. It's about making a system where influence comes from doing good work and serving the public,
Right.
not just buying it like some product.
Exactly. And this brings us to another crucial piece: education and civic engagement. You know, informed and active citizens, they're the strongest defense against any kind of tyranny, oligarchy included. If we teach people how to think critically, how to spot misinformation in the media, and encourage them to get involved in politics, we give them the power to resist manipulation and hold their leaders accountable.
It's about going from just watching to actually participating.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that democracy isn't just something we have, it's something we do. It needs constant work.
So well said. And I think it's really important to point out that this isn't just about some high-minded ideals. This fight against oligarchy, it has real consequences for people's lives. It's about making sure everyone has a fair shot at a good life,
Yeah.
that opportunities are there for everyone, and that the benefits of economic growth are shared, not just hoarded by a few.
So it's not just about who's in charge,
Right.
but what they do with that power. It's about creating a society where everyone has a voice, where everyone's needs are important, and everyone has the chance to be their best selves.
Exactly.
Right.
In the end, this whole fight against oligarchy is a fight for a more just and fair world, a more democratic world. It's a fight that needs courage and persistence and a willingness to challenge the way things are.
It's a fight that asks all of us to be informed, to be engaged, to get involved in our communities and beyond. It's a fight that reminds us to be watchful, to hold our leaders accountable, and to never take our freedoms for granted.
It's a fight worth having, because what's at stake is way too important to ignore.
Couldn't agree more. I want to thank you for taking us on this deep dive into the world of oligarchy. It's been really eye-opening and thought-provoking.
It's been my pleasure. I hope this deep dive has given everyone listening the knowledge and tools they need to be more informed and engaged citizens.
And as always, we want to leave you with something to think about. If oligarchy is this constant danger, something that can sneak in even in societies that seem democratic, what does it really mean to be a good citizen in today's world? What are the things we can do every day? The habits, the mindsets that can help us protect our freedoms and make sure power really stays with the people?
Those are great questions to think about because this fight against oligarchy, it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing commitment to democracy, to fairness, to equality.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep